So it's 2 minutes to 2. The countdown to the Pamwin Plus second webcast has begun. And what I'm hoping is that Johnny Sweetman, if you're out there, that's Johnny Sweetman of Eastbourne, East Sussex. Could you please get in touch with your mother? She says your dinner is in the oven. That's Johnny Sweetman of East Sussex. Please contact your mother. Your dinner is in the oven. I'm hoping for confirmation of whether it's chips or roast. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the second Pamwin Plus 3 webcast. It's 2 o'clock. It's the... You can't hear me at all? I have unmuted. Yeah. It's 2 o'clock, so we're going to make a start. Some of you will have been to these webcasts in the past, but we had conference calls on where everybody could hear each other and dogs barking in the background and so on. So we've opted for this YouTube route. We've got half an hour. This is focused on things for administrators and supervisors, plus some project management features. And if you have any questions at all during the webcast, you can email Craig. He's the chap who emailed you notifying you of the webcast. It's craig.oosthausen@m3h.co.uk, and I'm not going to attempt to spell his surname live on air. Or if you have a Google account, you can ask questions directly by typing into the YouTube messages as they come up. So as with last week's webcast, 2 weeks ago, we don't know how many of you are watching. All we can do is speak. So I've got 3 things to show you today. The change in data maintenance layout, new graphs and cash flows for monitoring, and a change to the way the reports are structured, including this thing called fast mode. But just before that, assuming that not all of you have seen the new business presentation, I'll just talk you through some of the changes to look and feel, because Pamwin has had a makeover. We have changed all the fonts, we have changed all the colors, and we've also dramatically cut down on the number of menus on the left-hand side. So when your users log in, if there's nothing open, they'll just see something which says open and appraisal to see the sidebar menus. So if I then open something, so I'll just open this one, then you should see that on the left-hand side, there are now 2 menus, one for appraisal and one for management. And in this case, I've opened a project, a consolidation, and the scheme selector has been changed. So it shows you a list of all of the tenures in the project. Instead of the previous drag and drop in and out, we now have buttons down here for removing a tenure, for adding a tenure which you've already created, for putting in a new tenure into the appraisal, or looking at the details. Speaking of which, the phrase tenure is proposed to replace the phrase scheme throughout the system. So whereas in Pamwin 2932 and below you had open project, open scheme, open selection, we now have open project, meaning open a site with 1 or more tenures, or open a single tenure, which corresponds to the old scheme. There will be other changes in the navigation I'll point out as we go along. In fact, let's have a look at one now, which is that we've got a project open, but Pamwin is now fully multi-window, for want of a better word. So if I were to come in here and search and open something else and double click, it doesn't actually open in the same window, it opens in a separate window, which in fact is off the screen. So anything you do, whether it's a selection or a project or a scheme, will continue to create new windows so you can drag them around and work on them side by side. So let's have a look at the specifics for today then. Changes to the monitoring. The number one request we had for the cash flow on screen was a horizontal cash flow. So hoping very much that it loads, because it did when I checked it before. Yes, it does. Great. So there's a new view for the cash flow. This is for a consolidation. So you have all of the account categories on the left-hand side, and the months and the financial years across the top, and you can scroll through and see movements month on month. That was requested over and over again. What we'd previously done is said, you have this format on the screen, and you can choose how you pivot it. You can choose to say our primary thing here is whether it's been paid or not, or the financial year, or break it down by tenure by dragging these up to the top to group and seeing, let's have a look at month and perhaps financial year, deriving a pivoted cash flow from within this. Those of you who liked this feature and have used it, you haven't lost it. So we've got financial year and then month and tenure. So that's saying financial year 16-17. For October and December, it's this much. And for affordable and shared ownership, it's this much. That's still there. And in fact, we've added to it. If you're using the expand and collapse feature of the pivot cash flow, you can click on export and it'll dump it into Excel just as it is. I've just had Excel open on my other screen, and there it is. There's the raw details subtotaled in Excel. The new cash flow, on the other hand, is much cleaner and much easier to see. And because Pamwin has gone multi-window, if I were to undock this window and I close down all the others underneath, then I can open up the account timings and rearrange, or in fact just use the docking feature. So I'm going to close down all the windows except for the cash flow and the account timings and have one on top of the other. So you can be editing your cash flow at the top and then see what the impact is on the bottom down here, backs and forwards. So that's one attempt to try to make it easier and more transparent to update cash flows. The second one is on the budget monitoring. Now on the resolution on my screen, I think this is going to pinch the headings. Budget monitoring has had a graph for a while, but it wasn't particularly easy to read. And that's now been replaced with a stacked bar graph. So for month on month, it's showing you the original in yellow, the baseline position in blue if you had one. So this scheme is now so delayed that going back to 2014-15, it was spending money here and then receiving sales money here, so the cash flow went negative cumulatively. And over here is where the new forecast starts, the current position, because the thing is so slipped. So that's what you're seeing, the gap between the green lines here and the blue and yellow are the slips in the cash flow. I don't know how many of you use the baseline feature a lot, but if I were to go into the account timings and set baselines for each of these, that overrides the original. Doesn't override the original. The original is always kept. That creates a baseline position from the current. So when you go back to look at the graph, everything has changed. So if I go back and look at the graph, you can now see there are fewer greens over here, and there's a difference now between the baseline and the original for some of these. So that's two changes on the cash flows and the graphs. We looked last week during the appraisal session on some changes to try to make it easier to update cash flows in bulk. We're still working to see how we can get a true apportioning of a site cash flow going down to the 10 years. At the moment, that's all carried out in a Pamwin add-on in Excel, which some of you use. But in the meantime, we do have the ability to open up the top of the account timing screen across all schemes at once. If I maximize the account timing screen, so You can see here you've got shared ownership, affordable rent, another shared ownership, and each of these at the top has a percentage attached to it. We've now put percentages in a line instead of being staggered. But if you want to, you can look at the entirety of the site. Let's have a look at the appraisal screen. Still getting used to new icons myself. I was looking for the old one. And when it comes up, there is a button which says project timings. So project timings brings up a matrix of all of the timings for all of the items in the site, plus a total. And where it says that it is set at project level, this means that if you change the acquisition payments we paid out partially at acquisition and partially at exchange of contract, that will go across all of them. And at the end, there is a total with an exclamation mark showing where you haven't got to 100%. So if I were to make this 10% exchange of contract and 90% at acquisition, that adds up to 100. And we've set it so that you can't click OK and close the thing down if you've errored. So there you go. If I've got that as 9 here, the OK button is grayed out. Incidentally, I forgot to mention at the start of this, and for those of you who know me for a while, I have not started hanging out around jazz clubs, well, not any more than I used to. We've all got a bit of a cold and chest infection in the office, and everybody at the moment is sounding a bit like Barry White, even some of the women here. So apologies if I'm graveling and quite hard to follow. Let's hope the next webcast everyone's recovered. So we'll set this to 90%. The OK button comes back up. And if it's blacked out or grayed out here, that means that it's currently set at the level of each individual tenure or scheme in old money. So you could say, well, I wish to align all these. So I will say this is now set at project level and then set everything to happen at, for instance, completion. The OK button comes up. When you click that, it changes every single tab in the project. I may as well mention a couple more things while we're here, because some of you could be new business. We've had a change around of the appraisal screen. The costs are now on the top left, and the receipts are on the bottom left, giving you a bottom line. And we'll need to make a note that on a small resolution screen, some of this is not showing properly. The development statistics are on the top right, and the KPIs are on the bottom right as before. So we swapped the receipts around with the statistics. We've also added in several more lines. We've got a line here for sales where you're just looking at shared ownership, but it was realized on a project level that you could be putting in private developer where you're looking or trying to look at phases of a site for private development where there's kind of an alpha appraisal or a headline appraisal across all tenures. So it's then showing you, is there any designated private sales income or designated affordable income? What's the total income or the total receipts? What borrowing requirement do you have? And below this line, cross subsidy, subsidy on private sale, profit on private sale, profit on affordable, and then a bottom line saying what the borrowing is by the time you've got this additional income in, or factored in profit as a cost. I'm aware that was a very quick explanation. Maybe at the end, if there's time before 2:30, I'll go back and show the private developer model again, just as a recap. So we've looked at the horizontal cash flows and the graphs and the new project timings mechanism. The next thing to show you is this question about the fast mode on reports. And what I'm going to do is click the button which is now labeled Refresh KPIs. And what you should see is the indicator coming up. There it is. And it should take way less time than it used to, because we've stopped automatically opening Excel. It's using an emulator and running through. And in fact, what I'll do is I'll just do it on a single scheme here, and you should see the difference even more. So if I go to appraisal here, and click on it here. So it's no longer opening Excel. It's saying, I've finished. Do you want to see the revenue forecast? To which the answer is, no, I don't. And because we've reorganized the screen, you've now got twice as much space for your own personal KPIs as you used to have. The Refresh KPIs button in green appears also on properties. If you're changing the properties around here, or say that the values have changed to 300,000, when you change a value on the properties screen, these figures blank out, but there's a refresh button down here, and it triggers the calculations revenue forecast from here and just fills them in, and that's it. It stops there without opening Excel. When we put this feature in, we thought that was it. That's all we were going to do, and every single report was going to be generated in this way. But we realized that for those of you who use pivot tables and have put pivot tables into your standard reports, the mechanism which emulates Excel strips out the pivot tables. So we've given you the choice as to how you wish to calculate the reports. So here I have a standard cash flow development period formatted, and if I change the name of it to development period fast mode, you'll see down here there's a tick box that says use fast mode, and when we ship Pamwin 3, by default this will be on for every report on the grounds that, well, why would you want slow mode? So I'll click that there and say OK. Now when I hit one report, it's almost instantaneous, and then it opens Excel, and there it is, and there's the interest sheet. So it really is super fast. But if you want to do it the old way, because you've got pivot tables, you could have your users running their reports in fast mode. But if you're happy to go off and let it run for a while, rather than rebuild the pivots, if you were to copy this and say development period slow mode, hope you get the typing, untick use fast mode. We are thinking about, just before we ship this, a better label than use fast mode. The implication is you would be crazy not to use fast mode. It might be something like support pivot tables or use emulator. I don't know, but I've just ticked it off now. So if I click OK on this, and I've got two, development period fast mode and slow, and now when I double click on the other one, it's doing it excuse me, as it is before, and it opened up Excel and output Excel one by one. There is another aspect to all this, which may cause some of you who are long-time users to cheer. Whether you choose to do it in fast mode or slow mode, I do that again, we have abandoned the view, print, close thing. It comes up if you do it in slow mode and says report complete. Okay, and at that point switches to Excel, but then it breaks the link with Excel. There's no longer any risk that you could be, as you were in the past, running a report out of Pamwin, then going to Excel, then opening something else, then getting confused and clicking close in Pamwin and wondering why everything had shut. So we've looked at the graphs of the cash flow, and we've looked at fast mode and slow mode. Have we got any questions coming in, or is everybody watching aghast at how amazing it looks with the new black and white icons and the blue and grey? No, so far so good. I've got Craig sitting here, being Samantha and keeping a score for me. So the last bit of this session is to look at data maintenance and changes to data maintenance. The data maintenance was previously one menu, and we've made a very simple change by putting in arrows and a tree structure. And we've also made some categorizations. This is an interim, I'd say, for perhaps more radical changes later on. So the name data defaults hasn't been changed. It's still got the same management and maintenance, not management and maintenance, sorry, the same things in it. It still has the account codes, the interest rates, the inflation rates. These are kind of global settings which change everywhere across the system if you were to change them. But you can now drop straight in. You don't have to go into data defaults and then select a rate. You can go to data defaults, interest rates, and just straight in. The General codes, as was, we knew that some codes are more important than others. Users, KPIs, revenues, and so on were important. So they've been called major codes and split out here. So major codes is companies, KPIs, revenues, custom fields, stages, and so on. Anybody uses. Minor codes is all the other stuff which some of you use and indeed use for your own purposes, others don't. Likewise, patterns, that's straight in. And if we have a look at the HCA tables, the broad rental market areas and the local authority broad rental market area compatibilities and the local housing allowances, for those of you who are based in London, this is how we're proposing to support the London living rent, because if you're in London and you're doing affordable rent or living rent, then you're looking at not the local housing allowance, but actually the ward rent as set by the GLA. So we're going to send a script out with Pamwin 3, which allows you to append the list of London wards to the bottom of this table here, and then it'll set itself up so when you select a borough in London, you'll see a ward category as well as a broad rental market area category. A couple of other things about this menu. If you open up an awful lot of these, and you keep going, whatever they are, then the windows don't work. If you're in a scheme and you're still appraising a scheme and you decide that you wish to tile the windows to have a look at what's going on with the scheme, then you realize that actually you've got 20 data maintenance things open. So there is a feature to close data maintenance, which I could do there. So you can close all the screens at once, like so. That closes all the data maintenance screens, leaving just the appraisal ones open. Then you can retile the windows. Okay, slightly odd set. You've got appraisal there. I've had to plug in an old square screen in our quiet room to make this work. Most of you now, I think, have slightly better monitors than this. But you can drag around, you can change the shapes, you can have one on top of the other. So you can indeed close down properties, close down units, have the appraisal on the top, have the properties on the bottom, and be looking at all of these things, whilst in fact having a completely separate Pamwin in a different window in your monitor, if that's not enough windows for you. So that's everything I wanted to show you in this. We decided to break these what's news down into smaller sections because in the past we've been trying to show everything. At this point, I would say there is just about time to suggest very, very small changes, very small stylistic things if you want. We have lobbed in a last minute change. There was a big discussion about if you're working at project level, maybe I'll just bring that project back up, why you'd ever want to go back down to scheme level from within the project. And the answer given was to look at the assumptions. So it actually proved slightly easier conceptually to put in a project assumptions screen where you can see all of the scheme assumptions together and change them all at once if you've got permission, than to handle a single tenure or a scheme being simultaneously open at the same time as the whole site appraisal was open. So that's the very last thing that we're doing before we go to regression testing, unless of course one of you on these sessions comes in with an absolute must do before we release. So unless there are any questions coming through, I'll just spend the last 5 minutes going back over the private developer change, because that was really the most significant. So if I were to create a new private developer appraisal, I'll call it academic new fields somewhere in Mitcham. Template is going to be the model, local authority of Merton. And if I look at the broad rental market areas, we've already started demonstrating the ward here. There are not wards in Merton called Mitcham Daggybit and Wimbledon Poshbit, but in fact there might as well be. We happen to be in Figs Marsh. No, we're not Cricket Green. Or if you put it back to inner southwest London, that puts it back to the Broad Rental Market area there. So I'll set this up. And it's creating it in a new window. I've got two screens up here, so drag it back across. Put a property in, 2-bed, 3-person flat. Put another one in, 2-bed, 3-person house. Put a third one in, 2-bed, 4-person house. And they all start off saying the tenure is developer model. But if you say this one is shared ownership, this one is affordable, then my mouse is going to hit my, come on. There we are, affordable. So the value of a private unit, of course, is just its open market value. So I can just say that they're all selling 100%. You'll notice that I've just used the arrow keys moving around. We've made the whole grid much more Excel-like and intuitive. So the current value, let's say, is £400,000. That begs the question, what's the value of the affordable? If I were to peg the tenure types here and save, you could say, well, the value of the affordable is going to be an appraisal for affordable. So if I say file new single tenure, that comes up. Check the affordable value. We'll have the affordable rent here. Also in Merton. Also in South West London. And that has opened Pamwin in another window. So 2-bed, 3-person house. The we can put in the current value. The market value, we don't know what that is yet. If I look at the rent method, we now have rent as a percentage of local housing allowance, so I can set the rent to be 100% of the local housing allowance less services. Excuse me. And if we hit refresh KPIs here, even without changing to the appraisal screen, it's showing you the value of the net rental income on here, £308,000. So I can go back to my master appraisal and say the value of the affordable is that present value there, 308,000, 308,000. And I can take the value of the affordable here and just flip it into shared ownership. So if I flip this thing into shared ownership, typing into shared ownership, we are. So that converts it into shared ownership. And because this is Pamwin 3, it's done it again. It's created a third window for shared ownership. This is rather like dropping a gremlin into water after midnight if you've been used to Pamwin, closing and opening at the same time over and over again. So if we say what the current value is, and then the equity sold is 35%, these of course would have defaulted before had we done it. So the value of that unit there, if I refresh the database and refresh the KPIs, will come up here. This time it's not the present value of the net rental staircasing because you've also got the initial tranche sale. So the value here with zero costs is 461,000. So I can go back into my master developer and put in 461,000. Whoops, 461,000, and change the current value of this one to 500,000. With all these together, I've had a couple of questions coming in, which I'll acknowledge in a second. I'll just finish this. So with all these together then, we have the acquisition cost is 0 and works cost as before, no grant or RCGF per affordable units. And then we have the income from the private sale and the income from the affordable, giving total income. And if you want to make a profit on the private sale, you put in 20% profit. If you want to make a profit on the affordable, you put in profit here. And it now shows you the bottom line if you are including profit as a fixed item. So when you refresh KPIs, most of you who've implemented in the last 2 years have put in the indicative site RV into your KPIs. So it comes up with, excuse me, the indicative site RV, but taking into account the profit which you're looking to achieve. So the NPV surplus is 960,000, but the site RV is 820,000 because you're looking to make a profit of 100,000 in this case on the private sale and 38,000 on the affordable. So the other change you made here is that at the moment this is saying the profit's 824,000. It's deliberately different to this, so you could keep changing the acquisition cost till such time as this drops to 0, and it's very close to being able to allow a goal seek on that. We were wondering if we had time to squeeze that in. So a couple of questions coming in. One, will there be a session on calculating London living rent? We have sent out a video to some of you on calculating London living rent. I'm happy to do a webcast on it. How you do it depends on your version of Pamwin. There was already a model in Pamwin for rent to home buy after the last credit crunch. So you can reuse that, and we can send you a link to a YouTube video. If those of you are interested, just want to watch the video, tell Craig and we'll send it out. But I'm happy to do a separate webcast on it. In the meantime, because Pamwin Lite is a spreadsheet, we have much faster been able to prototype the London living rent in Pamwin Lite. Now don't forget that you're Pamwin Plus users, so your license automatically covers you to use Pamwin Lite. So this is the new Pamwin Lite with its new makeover, and there's London living rent with all the lookups, and there's London affordable rent with all of the target cap. That's essentially what they are, target cap lookups as well. So if you want to use this as a quick ready reckoner, please do ask for a copy and we'll send it to you. So if I bring up London affordable now by ticking on tab 7, then I can put in a single rent for London affordable. I'll choose 2-bed 4-person house. Incidentally, one of the things we suggested was, because Pamwin Lite is so fast to get the values out of the affordable, if I try to use Pamwin Plus to do the master appraisal with the phasing and the cash flows and the accuracy there, you can use Pamwin Lite here to derive the values. So it's already telling you the value for London affordable is 122,000. I should have ticked London living. That's the one that you're all concerned with because of the rent to home buy switch. So if I bring up London living, tab 6, and Pamwin Lite, flicking through and revealing tab 6, there it is. And say we've got London living rent. So the values are quite healthy for London living. In fact, in this case, they're higher than they are for the open market value, according to £300 a square foot. That's because you've got 10 years of rent and then a deferred sale with indexation. So the London living rent here is saying the rent is London living 100%, and the appraisal is showing costs for 10 years and then a second rent coming in at 2.5% of value or similar. So in fact, in Pamwin, it looks remarkably similar in the revenue screen. They are sister systems, the revenues sheet, I should say. So if you want Pamwin Lite to play with this, then ask Craig and we'll email it to you. And if you want the video that we've done already on London living in Pamwin Plus, then similarly, we'll send it out. But I'm happy to do a separate session like this where people can ask questions on how to set it up. So the final question we had is there scope to input and adjust costs at project level? This has always been a halfway house. If I were to open a project, we wanted to do an appraisal here. How have I got? A new multi-tenure. There's nothing in there. Well, I may as well show you from the off actually. Let's just create one. So File new project. Maybe with promise. It's not built yet. Here, instead of saying project created successfully, if you wish to add schemes, etc., etc., it takes you into the scheme selector here, the tenure selector, as we're calling it now. And if you want to put an existing tenure in, you click on Add Existing, and you search for existing appraisals, and you put them in. And if you want to add a new one in, you click on Add New, and this is a new one, and you choose the template. You there, and add it in. So there we are. So there's one existing one and one new template. So I'm just about to get to the point about the costs. So you put these in as before, and we've not got to the point yet where you can put on costs in at project level, but we have been at the point for a while where you can put the site costs in at project level. And this has had a bit of a makeover here. The cost calculator button is down here. We've moved it off the screen. The cost calculator says, in sum mode, you'll say the affordable is £10,000 per unit, and the other one here is £5,000 per unit, whatever it is. It goes across. But if you switch to apportion mode, the top comes live here, and you can say the total for the site is 580,000, or the total of the works is 500,000. And when you click on apply, it apportions it down to each of the tenures underneath. So in the early stages of the appraisal, if you set your on costs up to be a percentage of works, as you have here, a percentage of acquisition, then all of the on costs will ripple through automatically anyway. And when you get to the point where you're doing detail, then we would expect you to go back and check these costs are correct for each of the tenures. So in common with everything else in Pamwin, the cost calculator has had a makeover. So from here, you can now bring up the overall costs for the site and apportion them. Excuse me. You can also bring up the overall timings for the site and change them. So we tried to make it more immediate and require fewer clicks up and down the menu. I've gone 6 minutes over time, so I'll just pause to check whether there are any more questions. And anything else? No more questions? Okay, so thanks very much for watching. The next scheduled one, I think, is for the 16th, by which point we'll be getting very close to release. And in the meantime, we will look at scheduling one on London living rent to talk through it and check that it's all working. Okay, thanks for listening.